A reading from the Gospel according to Matthew. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he repented and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. He said, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." But they said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." Throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went away and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said to one another, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since they are blood money." After conferring together, they used them to buy the potter's field as a place to bury foreigners. For this reason, the field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of the one on whom a price had been set, on whom some of the people of Israel had set a price, and they gave them for a potter's field, as the Lord commanded me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, Jesus did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But Jesus gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it for yourselves." Then as a people they answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed Jesus over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking Jesus, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man named Simon, and they compelled this man to carry Jesus' cross. And when they had come to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from this cross." In the same way, the chief priest also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking Jesus, saying, "He saved others. Can he not save himself? He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's son.'" The bandits who were crucified with Jesus also taunted him in this way. And from noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At about 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to Jesus to drink. But the others said, "Let us wait and see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said to one another, "Truly, this man was God's son." Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee and had provided for him. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When it was evening, there was a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was a disciple. He came and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to Joseph. So Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. He then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember what that impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days I will rise again. Therefore command the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I'm noticing the quiet now. There wasn't much of a difference at first, but it's definitely quieter. In the absence of planes zooming around at all hours, in the absence of motorcycles streaking up and down the street, without the constant thump of rock and rap music coming from speakers in cars, it's quieter. It's much quieter. Now I can hear the frogs at dusk, the owls hooting at all hours. I can hear God's creatures slinking around, rustling leaves and cracking the twigs as they make the graveyard shift. I'm sure you've noticed the quiet too. And in the quiet, the natural world has arrived, filling those silent spaces with their gentler voices and slower motions. Now, I should appreciate all of it. I love the quiet. I love the natural world. But I admit I'm unnerved by all of it, because I recognize that behind all of the quiet, there's upheaval. You recognize it too. Upheaval that 99% of us haven't experienced in our lifetimes. a jarring shift in our patterns and the pulse of life. Behind the quiet, there's danger, there's uncertainty, and there's suffering. We know it was a loud celebration at first. That event we now call Palm Sunday. The crowds are waving their leafy branches in adoration. There are cloaks on the ground, paving the way for the man of the hour who's made his way to the city. His entourage has prepared the route and the transportation, the room and board. And there's no social distancing in force in Jerusalem. So the people are shoulder to shoulder, shouting and singing and raising their hands and voices in honor of the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he. Hosanna. Hosanna in the highest heaven. They sing in joyful adoration. It's a huge event, a ruckus festival in Jerusalem. One that they will memorialize for posterity. Everyone's heard of Jesus' story by now. And here he is finally, in the flesh, in the city. He arrives in a wave of energy and hope, and his presence will upend the order of things. The lowly will be lifted. The powerful will be brought low. At least that's what the people of God surmise. Good times must be ahead. But out beyond the crowds, beyond the cloaks, beyond the singing and shouting and palm branches, among the shadowy spaces, trouble is stirring. Trouble that's fueled by fear and distrust and powerful forces who feel threatened by the rising influence of Jesus. As the Palm Sunday festivities continue, these threats will be whispered, deals will be made, alliances solidified. Some will bring out the money, fueled by revenge. An unfortunate few will just be so afraid of what's happening that they'll do and say things that they come to regret later. After Palm Sunday fades into memory, quiet comes into Jerusalem. Not a welcomed quiet, but instead the kind that announces danger, uncertainty, and suffering. Many will hunker down. Some will shelter in place in fear of that uneasy quiet. Others will run from it. By the time Friday arrives, only Jesus is still willing to enter it. And he does. Determined to confront and defeat the powers of this world that deny, that terrify, that divide, Jesus will step into the quiet and he will take up a cross courageously for us. And through his suffering, he will inspire others to take up their crosses as well. We will never forget this Palm Sunday, will we? This Holy Week. Most of us are sheltered in place, concerned, anxious about all that's brought this strange quiet into the world. We watch and we wait. And as we do so, we give thanks for the courageous ones who venture into the quiet on behalf of us. Like that researcher, developing treatments amid the hopeful hisses and clanks of the laboratory. Or the nurse managing the alarms that come from that life-giving IV. The trucker pulsing the shrieking brakes as he backs his load of supplies into the warehouse. Or to the police officer, responding to the noise on the radio as she keeps watch in our emptied neighborhood streets. The celebration has died down for now, dear friends. The palm branches will fade and crack before this week is done. There is much more quiet to come. Uneasy quiet. There is much more suffering to take in before this is all over. But we will sing and laugh again. We will gather again, shoulder to shoulder. We will rise from this, as sure as Easter comes. Amen.